All right. I think we're good to go. There we are. Hi, welcome everybody. I'm here with my dear friend Laura Prepon, who uh, wrote a book that I have in my hands that I just finished this morning, and it's called You and I as Mothers, and I was again blown away by Laura's um, facility with language and her ability to excessively articulate her experience vulnerably and so powerfully.
Thanks, girl.
Laura, I am not a mother, and I don't know whether if I will be one. But I was so moved by this book, and this morning I was sitting rereading parts of the stuff on control and stress, and how you've sort of negotiated pieces of that in your own life. And I can't wait to talk to you about it. It was so moving to me, and I think will help a lot of people. I think it's going to help a lot of people find some more freedom in their own experience.
Thanks, girl. I so appreciate that.
Oh my God.
Especially with what we're going on. Yes, with what's going on right now, I feel like that, especially with the control and stress and the tools that
Yeah.
are in there, it can, especially with what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I want to quickly say that your book, You and I as Mothers, is available right now, and the link in the description below. And you can have a copy physically shipped to you. And then, just be careful when you open it.
Then you can get an ebook. There's also
Then you can get an
that's probably, yeah. If you don't want a hazmat,
if you don't want to get a hazmat suit. So one of the things that I thought, right now, so many people are having a chance to spend so much time with themselves, and they're a, a big kind of like a lot of my people in my community are talking about big questions and a fair amount of anxiety coming up, and this is a big stressor. So not to compare this global pandemic with having a baby.
sure,
But
for sure.
I think that there's a lot of room right now for everyone to receive support around how to deal with um, all of the feelings that are coming up. And
Right.
I just wonder if I don't know. Like, I was just rereading, Laura, what you were talking about, how you are giving external thanks and speaking to your body and speaking to your experience affirmatively.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you find helpful right now in times like this, and then we can move into more parts of the book.
Well, you bring up a good point, girl, because it's like, while yes, having a child is different than the pandemic that we're going through right now, the level of anxiety
Yes.
is, it's all relatable. It's all
Yes.
relative, and it is, when I did become a mother, it was this seismic shift that rocked me at a guttural level.
Yes.
And I mean, you know me, I am not an anxious person. I worry is not really something that is part of my personality. But when I became a mom, it was such a shift for me that the anxiety levels were through the roof. I chipped my tooth in the middle of the night by grinding my teeth. I was so anxious. I was having panic attacks, which I'd never experienced before. And there were all these things that were going on for me. And the reason why I so badly wanted to write about stress and control is it is something that is so relatable, and that no matter what is going on in your life, whether you're a mother or not, you can relate to that lack of control and that kind of anxiety. And it was also really important to me, besides just sharing these stories, my personal stories, and then the other women that I interview in the book who are moms of all ages, you
Incredible.
know,
Also, you
different.
found such a beautiful a
Thank
treasure trove of women.
Thank you. No, but it's true. But you totally bring up a great point, which is that I wanted to give tools. I wanted that. Not only did I want to open the dialogue and have a conversation, but I also wanted that when you read this book to leave with takeaways and have tools to deal with, as example, stress and anxiety. And those are all things that are applicable with what we're all going through right now. So
Mhm.
that's a perfect example.
What are some of your favorite tools? Like what are some of the pieces that you write about that you utilize most?
One that you just brought up, the giving external thanks,
Yeah.
was something
I find
that
that incredibly helpful. That's a game changer for me. And it was, I didn't know, I mean, I've known you for a long time now, and I didn't realize the way you write about that. It feels like it's really a part of your practice. And that's really a part of my practice. I mean, I find that that can balance me like nothing else, to spend some time really acknowledging what is working and what I'm really grateful for. But that sounds like that's become a part of your life.
well, yeah, I mean, there is something about saying it out loud. There
Yeah.
is something about it's totally fine too if you just practice gratitude and say things to yourself as like
Yeah.
even like a little mantra or something, but there is something, and I write about it, as you know, in the book, when really surrounded around the loss of my second pregnancy is when I really started practicing this stuff. And I was really angry at myself and my body, and I didn't know why the loss, why that all had to happen. And I was just trying to find an answer because it didn't make sense to me. And when I was and then I started really practicing this external thanks, and it would be like, because I was so angry at my body and myself, I really started just holding my body parts, literally,
Yeah.
like, I love you arms, I
Yeah.
love you neck, I love you chest. And I would go through my entire body to get back in touch with myself, because I was so cut off, because I was filled with so much shame. And I feel like that happens a lot, especially with a loss of pregnancy, but also just in general. I feel like so many people can relate to that in
Yeah.
terms of having something that makes you angry at yourself or your body, whether it's something that you do that abuses your body, or even dysfunctional food things, which I also
Yeah.
had gone through, but also just anything that could hurt your body. Even giving external thanks and getting back in touch with that can help on so many levels. That was something that you brought up that was very helpful for me, that I wrote about in the book.
Yeah. I love, I love that you're talking about miscarriage also, because I know that I mean, we both know that that's an experience in so many women's lives that feels like, I mean, have you had this experience? I mean, I've had this experience of more than one person saying, I feel this happened and I feel alone, but sort of being able to hear that there's a whole constellation of us that, um, that's an experience that a lot of women have. And I really like that seem like you're committed to opening up the dialogue around miscarriage.
Well, it's like I feel like there's all these things that weren't being talked about.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was this kind of taboo thing. And why? Like, why do
Yeah.
these things have to be, I mean, I went back to work at 6 weeks after my daughter was born, after Ella was born.
I mean,
And
I still cannot believe that happened. And I love that you wrote about being in the shower
I
curtain.
know,
That's
totally. And our
so
arms are
funny.
like
I
tied
will
behind
talk
our
about that.
back.
Can you talk about that for a second? How you were pregnant, directing, starring, and naked and wrapped up with no arms in a shower curtain. I mean, what the what?
No, I know. We had to be lowered down to the floor by two people because we couldn't move our arms or limbs. It was absolutely insane.
God, I just
But it was, I mean, I remember having the duct tape put over our mouth, and I was like, action.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And I remember that so clearly.
yeah, it was,
I know we were also
after that, I can direct anything after that
absolutely.
situation.
I
But
agree.
it worked out great. And then, yeah, I found out I was pregnant during that whole thing.
Yeah, I just it doesn't even I
It was crazy. But yeah, I do feel like the reason why I wanted to write this book is I feel like there's so much not being talked about. I wanted to, and I feel like normally I'm a very private person. We keep our lives, you and I both keep our personal lives private. We've been fortunate enough to be in this industry and do the job we love for over 20 years, but we keep our personal lives private. And I feel like in order to really have this conversation and this open dialogue, I needed to drop my defenses and share these truths. And I do. And the response has been so wonderful. And the amount of people who read the book and feel seen and heard and feel like we're having this dialogue means so much to me, and I'm just so thankful. So and I'm so happy that the book spoke to you and that you love it. So thank you, girl. It means so much.
I love it. I think it's so, I just want to, before we go to, questions, I think that it's an incredible gift how you have shared so transparently your personal experience. And it's, like I said, I think it's going to really make space for a lot of people to take ownership of their own experiences. And what could be of more service right now? What could be more
Thank
helpful?
you. That means a
I
lot.
can't really think of anything. So I was thrilled to read it.
Thank
Should
you.
we take questions from people? Oh,
Sure.
I think
Yeah,
I'm
of course. I'd love to.
sorry. Oh. Yeah. I also, can I just personally, I'm very curious. I think it's really beautiful how you spent some time, and I think it's going to make a lot of people feel seen and cared for, how you go back and kind of research, unearth, spend time with your own mother, even looking at your grandmother and your childhood, sort of growing up and making space for that. And that,
Right.
Laura, I think it's incredibly powerful
Thank you.
stuff.
I
Um,
mean, I feel, and you and I have talked a lot about
I know.
our upbringings and stuff, uh, because we spent so much time together. And and we are private about that stuff. But I felt like when I never really thought about children, until I got with my husband, and we got together when I was 36. But because I've been working since such a young age, I wasn't one of those people who would plan my wedding or pretend to, when I get married, it's going to be this theme or that. I wasn't that at all. A lot of people called me a tomboy growing up, and I wasn't one of those people who really thought about getting married and having kids and wanting to do that sooner. I really was so focused on my career from such a young age that by the time I did become a mother, 37 years old, it was because I was so thrown for, like, I was completely upended. I didn't know what to do, what was going on. I felt like, for someone who I normally consider myself that people come to get things done, and I pride myself on being the rock for people, I felt completely out of control.
Yeah.
And naturally, I went to, as like a survival mechanism, I looked immediately to how I was raised.
Mhm.
And for the first time, that was really the first time I looked at how I was mothered. And
Wow.
all of us came from a mother figure. All of us came from that, and we all have a relationship or not with that figure. And we're affected by that. Whether you have one or not, you're affected in some way. And I really wanted to examine that in terms of how I examined it, to try to make some sense of what I was going through. Then when I looked at it, I saw a lot of how I was mothered. And while there were a lot of wonderful things, and I know that I wouldn't be where I am today without my mother,
Mhm.
there were also a lot of very dysfunctional things.
Mhm.
And I felt it was so important to talk about, because that's another thing that I think is so relatable to people, to really examine how we were raised, what we get to choose as people, as parents, just what we pass on to the next generation, or what we put out there with our communication.
Yeah.
And it was something that I really examined for the first time in my life. And I write a lot about that and how that's affected me as a person. It took a lot, and the process of writing this book and getting it out there was so healing.
Yeah.
And to have the reader, be able to look back at their childhood and what they choose to take or leave behind. I wanted that to be, because I was empowered by that, and I hope the reader is after they
Yeah,
read that.
I think I really love how you kind of like leave questions for people and things like that at the end, because that's another tool that I feel absolutely has everything to do with motherhood, and everything to do with everyone. It's a totally universal, brave act to sort of examine where we are coming from so that we can move forward intentionally. And it's cool
Thank
to see you sort of lay the groundwork of how you did it, and it's a nice little map for other people. So do
Thank
you
you.
have any advice um, for balancing your uh, family responsibilities um, and like your work life? How does that work for you?
Well, for me, I struggled a lot with mom guilt. When I went back to work at 6 weeks and I was directing by the time my daughter was 4 months old, and I mean, and specifically, when we go to work, we work very long hours, no
Yeah,
matter most of the jobs that we go to, we work long hours.
yeah,
And the mom guilt was really, really hard. So for me, I quality over quantity became very important to me.
ah,
And, the amount of quality time that you spend with your
yeah,
loved ones or your partner is something that became very important to me, because you can be with someone for
yeah.
a long amount of time and not be present.
See, and
Whereas,
I think that's also, you articulate that so beautifully, because, and I think that that leaves a lot of room to, like, you can really, and it's quality time in career, and it's quality time with friendships, as you talked about, like
100%,
the mom squad, and it's quality time with your daughter and your son
right,
versus quantity, right? Like, and that,
exactly.
that, so it seems like that kind of, or tell me that that sort of gave you a little bit more freedom, like that let the pressure off a little bit when you realized that.
Totally. And no, you're spot on. It's like you can spend all this time and not be present, but if the time that you do spend with that person or those people is quality time,
Yeah,
that will refuel you, when you do experience guilt or something from not
I
spending
love
as
that.
much time with them.
I love that. And it really kind of like it sort of like lowers the expectation of having to constantly be in communication or spending time.
100%,
It's like
totally.
it's about really precise and potent acts of connection. Speaking of, how are you connecting right now to like your mom squad and your friends and your community while this is going on during quarantine?
Well, stuff like this is great because social media is such a big part
Yeah,
of.
talk about that too. I want to hear your take on social media also.
Well, social media is such a big part of community, and I think it's great that we have these platforms now so that people can have that, but it doesn't fill the face to face and hearing a voice. It doesn't fill that. And we're, as if you look at our ancestry of like hunter gatherer people gathering and all generations together, and you hear these things, if it takes a village, and I feel like now, especially and specifically with this self-isolation and the social distancing, we're so nuclear now and separated from each other, that things like this are very helpful to be able to see you, talk
Yeah,
to you, hear your voice, feel like I'm hanging out with you a little bit, really helps so much. Or even just a phone call. I find that helps so much more than just being involved with the social media. I feel like this is a much a better way of connection, is being able to hopefully
yeah.
see someone, or just even hearing someone's voice on the other end of a phone is a big
I
deal.
love that tend and befriend thing.
Right.
That's so beautiful. It's so true. I mean, I find that so much of um, the daily rhythm of my life is around that face to face or voice to voice connection, and kind of more than anything, um, it settles and reorients and centers.
Right. I mean, there's scientific studies showing that they did this test, and besides a daughter texting a mother, as example,
Yeah,
a phone call a phone call had such a bigger impact, just hearing the voice versus a text on a phone. And
see,
there's actually scientific studies about that, and that's why I wrote about that in the book, because you don't really think about that, because we're all so quick to shoot a quick text because we're all busy and this and that, but there is something about that human connection. And if you can't sit down in front of someone, especially now, um, having something like this where we can see each other, or picking up the phone, really is better, and you'll feel more connected
yeah,
than social media, which is an amazing tool and
totally.
platform. It's just different.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's nice. I think that's another gift that you're giving uh, as a self care tool, connecting with friends, and the way that you kind of make that so clear.
Thank you.
It's helpful. It's a helpful tool. It really is.
Thank you. That makes me so happy.
It is. It's so nice. You know, I've been finding lately there's so much power in just naming a thing, because there are these truths that we all sort of know and live in and experience, but it's so powerful when someone names it. And that's what you're doing. You're saying, I see this and this works for me. This is true. When did you decide that you wanted to write this? Was it when you were pregnant with Ella? Is it afterwards, or when you were first dealing with the sort of postpartum stuff?
I first decided that I wanted to write this book when after it was shortly after Ella came, and I was dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety and being back at work and dealing with that mom guilt and the level of stress I was dealing with, the panic attacks, which is so not my personality. I really realized that I had to get a handle on it. So I started just writing it down. And similar to making a gratitude list and things like that that I write about as well, I just started writing it down and getting my thoughts out. And after talking to my family, I actually, my husband, Ben, was said that you can't be the only one dealing with this. And that's when
Ben said that.
that's when I really started.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's when I really started, because I was already putting it out, and I'm like, why is this such a secret? Why am I so blindsided? Why can't I get a handle on this? And that's when I decide. And here's the other thing too.
Yeah.
I could not find a voice to turn to. I couldn't, because I'm a researcher. I prepare. That's, I think it's just because it's part of our job to research all this stuff when we have to step into someone else's shoes to figure out. I've always been a researcher and a prepper. And there were so many books about pregnancy, and then there was nothing for the rest of my life. I'm like, that's 9 months. What about everything else?
What about
I couldn't find a resource, and there was such a void for me, because there's books about parenting, but there weren't books for me as the woman, as the mother, as the person.
Yes.
And that's why I felt it was so important to write this book, to not only share these stories and the things that I was going through and things like examining my upbringing, but also talking to the mom squad, because I wanted mothers of all ages and different backgrounds to speak to these common things that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Like we talked about anxiety, stress, how you were mothered, self-care, all these things are so universal. And I wanted to put something out there for people to turn to. And writing this was so amazing for me to be able to share this stuff. And the response has been great. And people have been getting so many wonderful things out of it. And it just makes everything worth it. I'm so thankful.
Yeah, I'm so thankful. I mean, and I'm also just thankful that we can do this and chat for a little while.
Seriously.
In the midst of quarantine. And
Yeah.
to read this, I it's a really beautiful thing. Do you want to take questions from audience people now? Is there anything you want to talk about?
Yeah.
I think we're waiting to see some little bits and bobs. I know we talk so much about, I think over the years we've shared our healing journeys through different pieces, different parts of life, and exploring, what's working for us, what's not working for us, different phases, different rhythms, different seasons of what kind of life is bringing. And it's just so exciting to see this portion of it harvest, Laura. Like, it's very cool. It's very cool to see this sort of.
We've been through a lot together, We've been through a lot together.
We sure have. And this is such a beautiful offering now to kind of like put a period on this sentence and allow it to be of service to so many people. So
thanks, girl. That means a lot.
Is there anything else? I'm not seeing the questions from people watching. I don't know if I should.
Okay. We can just keep chatting.
Yeah, I'm happy to
Miss
keep chatting
you.
with you forever. Um, I I just think, well, this is like coming back to lack of control and just
Yeah, exactly.
um it is.
It's just, it's so great to see you.
I know it really is. And I think, how are you like, um how do you decide when you're moving through these different phases from, as a public figure, um how do you decide what you want to keep private and what you want to share, not only from, not only as a public person, but with your community, with your friends, with your
Right.
support system, your personal support system, just as an act of self-care? Where do you go to connect? um how do you choose what your support system is going to
Well,
helping you with?
yeah, it's a constant negotiation, especially being that we are in the public eye. It's a constant negotiation what we share, and everything that I put out there, it's a discussion with my family, with
Yeah,
yeah,
beautiful.
with my partner. So anything that I choose to put out there, and any of the stuff that I wanted to write about, for example, that was very personal, because I share so many personal, vulnerable things in the book, was all a discussion with my partner that
Yeah.
we made sure we were okay with it. And because it doesn't only affect me,
No, yeah.
so that's something that you always have to consider. And it's a daily negotiation, especially having children. There's no judgment how people put their families out there, if they choose to put pictures or not or whatever, but it's a personal thing for everybody. And for us, it's always a discussion, and there's a lot of care taken with that.
Awesome. I love that so much. Well, I also love knowing that Ben was the one that reflected back to you that other people would find this experience useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's also when you're going through this, it's the thing that was so surprising to me was that become mothers have, I mean, it's not a new notion becoming a mother. I mean, through and when you look at how long we've been around,
Mhm.
it was so shocking to me that it was such a seismic experience for me, and such a shift, that I was just so surprised that I didn't have a heads up. And the other thing too is I remember asking a friend of mine who'd had a baby before I did, and I asked her, because I'm a researcher and I like to be prepared. I'm like, what do I need to look out for? And she literally looked over both shoulders and then leaned in to whisper. And I'm like, why are we whispering? Why is this a secret? I don't understand why are we supposed to feel ashamed to admit that we don't have it all together?
Right.
And whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a working mom, because a stay-at-home parent is just as hard.
Yes.
And I couldn't understand why it was such a secretive thing, and why it needs to be shrouded in darkness, that we don't have it all together all the time. Nobody does.
Nobody does.
And why are you all of a sudden feeling ashamed now that you have a child? All of a sudden you're ashamed about that.
No.
It's not that's why we needed to have that conversation, because and that's relatable across the board. It's like, why are we ashamed if we don't have it all together?
Right.
Being
And
a
I think that
person is a complicated experience.
being a human is incredibly complicated and nobody has it all together. And I
Nobody.
like that as we can each like toss in our own experience into the rink, it like lessens the shame bubble around not having it together as a human. So I feel like you've done that. I'm being
Thank you.
told that now it's time to wrap up our conversation at one.
Oh, that was so quick.
I mean,
I'm
that
like,
was so quick. I could talk to you forever about this, but this
you
is
too.
really, really beautiful. I'm so glad I had an opportunity to read it. I feel like I know you better. I feel like I feel more excited. I feel like I don't need to control as much. I feel less anxious. It helped me with everything.
That
That
makes me so happy.
yeah. Thank you, Laura. I love
Thank
you.
you. I love you.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed the little chat. Bye.